Have you ever felt like your construction business was running you instead of the other way around? Does it feel like every day is just a cycle of friction and turbulence and firefighting, chasing down problems that never seem to end? Now imagine what it would be like to double your revenue while actually reducing your working hours and finally getting control over your schedule, all by shifting how you run your projects before you even start. Hey, you're listening to the Construction Leading Edge podcast, where it's all about systematizing your construction business to eliminate chaos and maximize profit, freedom, and impact. My name is Todd DeWalt, spelled D-A-W-A-L-T, and my team and I have helped over 400 construction companies do just that, eliminate chaos and grow their profits and grow their team. Today on the show, we're diving into a big question. What if the key to growing your construction business isn't on the job site, but it's somewhere else? To help us answer that, we're joined by Ryan Brining and Tom Battersby, co-founders of White Maple Construction. They went from a couple of finance guys who became hospitality guys who became construction business owners. And they started their business in 2020 and quickly grew it. And they were dealing with sleepless nights and a lot of friction and chaos. And they went from that to doubling their residential remodeling business with systems that keep their business and their clients on track. In this episode, you'll learn a few key things. Number one, why pre-construction systems are your best friend when it comes to profitability. Number two, how setting clear expectations up front transforms client relationships and why your clients want you to do that. And number three, the mindset shifts that helped Ryan and Tom stop saying yes to the wrong projects. And there's something pretty unexpected that we'll cover. How saying no to certain clients was one of their best marketing strategies that helped them double their business. So if you're ready to get out of the weeds and grow your business and have a business that works for you, stick around for this episode of The Construction Leading Edge. Here we go. My conversation with Ryan Brining and Tom Battersby, owners of White Maple Construction. Enjoy. Ryan and Tom, welcome to the podcast. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Good day, thanks.
Tell us a little bit about your business. What's the name of your company? Where are you located? And what kind of work do you do?
Name of the business is White Maple Construction. We are located in Oakland, New Jersey, which is in Bergen County, 30 minutes outside New York City. And we are focused on residential remodeling, additions, whole home remodels, and trying to get into custom homes a little bit.
How did you guys get started in business?
Ryan and I both have very similar stories, and we both came into construction a little bit by happenstance. So we actually both were in finance out of college. We both then went into hospitality independently. He actually ran a restaurant, and then I worked in hotels for a few years. He's my brother-in-law, and we were chatting, and we both were thinking about starting a construction business. And since we live close to each other, we didn't want to have competing construction businesses, so we decided to take a crack at it. And it wasn't something either of us had any real formal training in, and we dove into it and learned a lot. Some of it we learned the hard way. We're now 5 years in, and we really have our feet pretty solid on the ground here.
Yeah, we started slowly in 2020, both of us on job sites, just doing small projects with one other guy, and we've grown organically since then.
That's a non-traditional path into construction, finance, into hospitality, into construction. So I'm curious how both of you would answer this. Why did you want to start a construction business? Ryan, sounds like you both came to the same conclusion. Ryan, why did you want to start a construction business?
The catalyst is probably similar for both of us, which is that Tom's brother, Doug, was an architect who had his own business and was referring lots of residential business to different contractors and was just, saying, it wouldn't be that hard to kind of pick this up. And then we actually got into it. And as soon as we got started, he went back to his old architecture firm, and his main client was the post office, and he had no more work to give us. So then we kind of had to figure it out for ourselves. But I didn't really have as much of a background in it as Tom did. So that way,
part of my job when I was in hospitality was managing the physical structure of the building. So I had some crews that I was running, and then I bought my own house and gutted it and just put it back together over the course of a couple of years by myself. And I finished that house, and then I just kind of kept going and doing houses for other people.
I owned the restaurant that I was running previously. And so, I was more of the entrepreneurial business side of it. So it was a good combination.
Yeah. I want to come back to the crossover from hospitality into construction, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But we'll come back to that in a few minutes. I also want to talk about the partnerships and family, the family dynamic, being brothers-in-law. What was it that you guys were dealing with? What challenges or issues were you dealing with that led you to reach out to us initially before you joined our Systematize Your Construction Business program? What was going on that led you to that?
Yeah, so our projects were growing and our revenue was growing as a percentage pretty quickly. We were getting into bigger projects, doing like bigger kitchens and small additions and things, and we were realizing that not having all the selections done before we started was a big problem, but we didn't really know what to do about it. So, we kind of tried to say, okay, well, we'll just tell the clients that they have to have all the selections picked out before we start. And we tried that on a couple of projects and they just didn't really do it. And then we realized, I found the podcast and had been listening to that for a while. And then I kind of just decided to DIY pre-construction and started selling some pre-construction agreements. And then we kind of decided that it was time to actually jump into the program and do it the right way.
Okay.
I think one thing that was interesting that I learned going through SYCB was I always felt like the customers were really dictating to us how they wanted their project to be run. And I thought that was the norm and that was acceptable because it's their house that we're working in. And one thing that we got out of SYCB was that it's our business that's actually doing this project. And we're going to have to run this the way that works for our business. And that was a really big mindset change to realize that we have to have a system in place and the jobs are going to run within that system, not within a system that a homeowner makes up. And I guess I just never realized that I could implement that and push. And actually people like that because then they don't have to come up with a system for themselves for how their project is going to be ran. They like that we come in and we're organized and we have a plan. But I was, I guess, nervous or scared to take that leap and tell people this is how it's going to be done.
Yeah, I think in general, setting expectations is a really difficult thing to do. But once you know that it makes sense and you get that confidence, it makes a big difference.
What you explained, Tom, is very, very common. People think, well, they're spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in some cases. So it's like Burger King. They get to have it their way and we'll bend to them. So they get a custom home or a custom project and a custom experience. What sort of ripple effects or problems were you dealing with because you were trying to bend your business around what your customers thought they wanted or letting the customers dictate the process?
It was impossible to get anything done on time, for starters. Any sort of a schedule that you're trying to keep just went out the window. And then any sort of time that you thought you were going to spend just doubled. And so there's just massive profit bleeds. You have employees that are on job sites for 2 to 3 times as long as they're supposed to be. Without everything really clearly defined, everything becomes a gray area and a fight with the homeowner. And so what we realized was if we're just very clear up front about how everything is going to go, we're able to stick to the schedules, which makes clients a lot happier. And we're able to stay in budget, which makes us and the client a lot happier. And so it's just been a great experience.
I think I understand the connection, but what's the connection between customers dictating the process and things taking twice as long as they should and not getting anything done? Can you explain what you mean by that?
When the customer gets to dictate the process, right? We normally like to have the order that we do things in. And the customer, for instance, might want their laundry to be up and running as soon as possible. And so previously, we wouldn't have things spelled out about how we're going to do things within our system. So if a customer started to pressure us to get their laundry back up and running, we would stop everything and get their laundry room done. So now you're doing things out of the system and you're doing things inefficiently. And now they have their laundry room set back up, but you still haven't sheetrocked the rest of the project. The kitchen's still torn apart, their bathroom's still torn apart, their living room's still torn apart, but at least they're getting their laundry done now, right? And it actually makes the whole job take longer. It winds up costing us more money because maybe we've already priced out someone else to paint that laundry room, someone else to sheetrock the laundry room, and now I've sent my crew to do it just to satisfy the customer in that moment. And it's always short-sighted to do that. It seems like you don't want to have the fight with the customer and don't want to displease them, but really you kind of have to. But the easiest way to do it is before you start the project to tell them how it's going to be, how it's going to go. If you wait until you're in the middle of the project, it's too late.
Ryan, you said setting expectations. What were some expectations that were not being set in your projects that were leading to problems? Sounds like the expectation about having a process to follow was not being set. But what are some of the other expectations you wish you would have been setting years ago?
Yeah, I think that probably the biggest one is, saying that we're not going to start construction until all the selections are done. And we're also not going to be giving you a full estimate until the selections are done. And also, on that same vein, not doing free estimates was big. But I think a big part of it is, even if homeowners think they're doing the best thing for their project, they've, either never gone through a large remodeling project before, or they've maybe done one, and they don't actually know what the best thing for their project is. So they're trying to control something that is not going to go as well as, if we handle and set those expectations the right way.
Yeah. What are some of the expectations that you set really early on, maybe right up front in a project, that you feel are really crucial?
From a business standpoint, one thing that we've changed is having kind of a minimum project size. That's been a really big change for us, being able to disqualify more leads more quickly as we've, in the past year or so, as we've gotten larger. So that's, kind of sets the expectation for right off the bat of what kind of a business we have and what kind of projects we take on. And then I guess even on a preliminary video call that I would do with a client, I'm going to walk through exactly what our project management software is, how we stay on schedule, how we're going to go about construction once we get into construction, and also what the schedule is going to look like for pre-construction. And setting realistic timelines for pre-construction is a big one. A lot of people think they're going to start in a month and a half, and they haven't even started on architectural plans yet. Those things, like getting those expectations up front, have been really beneficial for us.
A lot of people dream of being able to get all of their selections up front, but they don't feel like it's possible. They feel like if they ever tried this, the customer would push back and be unhappy or something. Sounds like you're on the other side of that. What are some of the biggest benefits to the client? Let's not even think about the builder or the contractor right now. What's in it for your clients to make all of their selections before you start the project?
There's two really big ones that come to mind. One is that it's a really stressful thing to go through a remodeling project in your own house, especially if you're living there, which happens sometimes. And this makes the project go much smoother and therefore be a lot less stressful for homeowners to have everything planned out and specified the right way before construction starts. And the other one, and this is, both of these are big selling features when I'm talking to potential clients, know a lot more accurately what the project is going to cost before construction starts. Because inevitably, as you go through the selection process, things are going to change and the scope of work will change. And it's much better to figure those things out before you break ground.
One of the lines in the Get Paid for Estimates script that we share is something to the effect of, okay, at this point in a project, you have two choices. You can get started with a free estimate, or we can go through pre-construction. So the question is, when would you like to know what you're going to get and how much it's going to cost? In the middle of the project or before you get started? And most rational people would say, well, before we get started. That's why we do pre-construction. And that's why you pay. That's the value that you get from paying for pre-construction. Yeah. Okay, so you guys jumped into our Systematize Your Construction Business program. Take us to the moment in that program where you realized that the systems you were implementing, that the work you were doing was actually working to solve some of your problems.
The most clear point was we had finished the program and we always had jobs in the future that we were targeting as the first job that would have gone through pre-construction properly. And so the best was we had one job, interior renovation project, and we had targeted that as the first job to go through pre-construction properly. It did. And the whole job was just smooth. Clients were happier. The crew working there was happier. The job went significantly faster than we expected, and a typical job like that used to take for us. And so that was kind of the clear moment. But it does take a long time from the first day you sign up for SYCB to the last day of the first project that's affected. It was probably about 8 months, because just the way a construction project goes, right? From the time you meet the client to the time you finish the project, it's a long cycle. That was great. Just having that first project that we realized this is going to work. And it did.
So a lot of people would say these problems are showing up on job sites. There are delays, there's low productivity, things like that. They feel like the problems are in operations, like they need to go drive productivity, yell at their subcontractors, hire, fire people, whatever. It feels like the problems are happening on the job sites. Therefore, the solutions need to be implemented at the job site level. What would you say to those people who are having those kind of problems? Where should they look? Where should they focus their efforts on?
Yeah, I think the key is, kind of a change in mindset and realizing that our job is to make everyone in the field's job as easy as possible. So that means, making the plans as detailed as possible, giving them as much information as possible, giving them all the information they need to finish the job, which is obviously something you say a lot on the podcast, but it's so true. And that's like what we're not there yet. It's not perfect, but we're getting closer, and it's so much better than it was before.
So Tom, you said you took that first project through pre-construction properly. What were some of the big changes you made? This term pre-construction is kind of a vague term for some people. How do you guys think about what pre-construction means now?
Pre-construction is, of course, primarily getting all the finished selections put together, organized in a way that the field members, whether they're our crew or subcontractors, are able to understand what it is and where it goes, getting all of your plans in order, and then, very important, conveying all of these details to our crews and our subcontractors, and making sure that the homeowner is on the same page. I think sometimes there's planning that occurs and things are not brought to the homeowner's attention. So if they aren't up to speed on every detail, then they're not going to be happy as things are progressing on their project.
Our typical project, we will have a truly collaborative effort from architecture. We have a selections coordinator in our office now, and then, pre-construction manager and project manager. And there's just a collaboration with all those parties and the homeowner as you go through pre-construction. That's just a lot more effective than just everyone keeping everything separate, which is essentially what we used to do.
Yeah. What would you say were the most impactful changes you've made in your business as a result of going through our SYCB program? In other words, what stands out to you as the top 2 or 3 systems or processes or tools that have had the most positive effects for you guys?
Thought about this a good amount, because I know you ask most of the people on the podcast this. And I think there are 5 really big things that we've done for our business. And most of them were a direct result of SYCB or came from that, but a couple of them were even separate. So the first thing we did was overhaul our marketing and really start increasing our marketing spend. Unfortunately, we started that before we started SYCB, so that led to, an increase in chaos and, more of a need for going through the program. But I think marketing, really was a huge piece, even if we did it in the wrong order. Pre-construction and perfecting the handoff, that was obviously a really big one for us, getting those systems in place to make that handoff good. It came directly from the SYCB. The accountability chart was really big, right at the start of SYCB, specifically, defining and separating the roles of sales, selections, estimating, and project management. And that allowed us to realize that, hiring a selections coordinator who can also do some admin roles, and then promoting one of our foremen to construction manager. Those were 2 really big moves for us. Pricing was another really big one, the 4th one there, which was not a direct result of SYCB, but something we learned as we went through the program, that our margins weren't where they needed to be, which was something that kind of allowed us to hire people as well. And then the last one is the CEO schedule, which was really big for me. I think both of us, but definitely for me. getting more efficient, getting time with no distractions to work on deliverables and improving the business, and thinking of every task in terms of, whether it's necessary or can be eliminated or delegated.
Marketing, you mentioned you may have done it in the wrong order, and doing that first led to chaos. How do you mean? Because a lot of people would say, we want to grow, therefore the first thing we need is more sales, therefore we need to crank up the marketing engine. In your case, why was cranking up the marketing engine not the right thing to start with?
Yeah. So actually, I started with reading Spencer Powell's book, Remodeler Marketing Blueprint, which is a great book. Really got me to doing some of the marketing myself. And then we hired a marketing agency. So at that point, we were still doing free estimates. So the leads ramped up, and there was almost, it was basically impossible for me to do estimates the way that I wanted to and do enough of them and, do them efficiently. And we were just losing leads, and I just didn't know what to do. There was no answer. That was bad. And then we were also getting a few more projects, and they weren't going smoothly. So there was just obviously chaos on both sides, the sales side, the pre-construction side that was, relatively non-existent. And then in operations as well.
Yeah. So if you had it to do over again, what would you have started with?
Yeah, definitely SYCB, and then maybe, in conjunction with starting the marketing at the same time, or marketing right after, I think would be, the way to go.
In hindsight, it's interesting because you're considering making an investment in SYCB, and you think you need to grow your business and be bigger before you can make that investment. But really the right time to do it is right now, because if you wait, your business just grows in the wrong way. And if I could go back, I would have made the investment really early on when our business was very simple, because then taking what you learned at SYCB and implementing it would have been that much more simple. The further down the road you go and the longer you wait to implement a good system, the harder it is and the more complicated it is. And it's always doable, but you should do it as soon as possible. It just makes growth so much easier, and it just calms you down. It allows you to really work on your business instead of just working on construction.
Hey, it's Todd here. We'll get back to the show in a second, but real quick, what if you're leaving profit on the table because there's a crucial phase of every construction project that you're already doing, but you're just doing it too late? If you're a custom home builder, a remodeler, or a commercial GC doing over $1 million a year, here's the hard truth. You could be carrying risk way too long, leaving your profits and your company exposed unnecessarily. Maybe you're scrambling to lock in subs and materials at the last minute, dealing with profit erosion because of unexpected cost increases and scope gaps. What if there's one step that your competitors are using to boost profits on their projects that you don't even know about? Well, that crucial phase is the buyout phase. A lot of small construction businesses don't have an effective buyout process, or may not even know what it is. That's why I put together the How to Buy Out a Construction Project Playbook. It's a free step-by-step guide that shows you how to structure your buyout, how to lock in pricing, secure subs, and protect your profits before you even show up on site. There's a playbook you can download, a masterclass training video, and a buyout checklist you can just download, print, and start using on every project. Think about it. Would it be a bad idea to spend a few minutes to download a playbook that could add 3, 5, or 7 points to your bottom line net profit on every project? It's a simple adjustment that you can make in a short amount of time that has a huge impact potentially. So go grab your copy now over at constructionleadingedge.com/buyout. That's constructionleadingedge.com/BUYOUT. Now, let's get back to the episode. How would you quantify the cost of the inefficiencies you guys were dealing with? That's probably something we chatted about briefly when we spoke initially, but when you look back on it, what was the lack of pre-construction and the friction and turbulence and chaos? Like ballpark, what was that costing you per year, you think?
Yeah, I think we had talked about it mostly in terms of what the profit bleeds and the potential costs might be. And we're probably estimating something like $100,000 a year. We might have had some opportunity cost in there budgeted in, but I think if you think of the potential growth as being able to go that much faster or that much sooner, like it's even hard to value. It's probably a lot higher than that. Yeah.
Part of what makes SYCB nice too is there's a lot of other contractors that are a part of it that you get to talk to. And so you learn a lot from them. And one thing that we learned was that our pricing was a little bit off. And, probably a third of our profit from one job now would cover the cost of SYC. And that wouldn't have been the case if we hadn't gotten that one tip from someone that we had in the class. And then, like Ryan said, we've probably had about $100,000 a year in profit bleeds. SYCB has really stopped that. So just between those two things alone, it probably pays for itself in about 2 weeks. But not 2 weeks last year, 2 weeks this year, but it really doesn't take too long for it to pay for itself.
Yeah, that's an exercise I go through with most of the people I talk to. And for some people, there's the big profit bleeds it's like the direct cost of rework, especially people who have a lot of hourly employees. Those numbers can get pretty staggering if there's inefficiency, giveaways, schedule delays, the direct cost of that. But then for some people, those direct profit bleeds aren't that big, but the opportunity cost, when we start thinking about, all right, how much more work could you do if things were more efficient, if you had the confidence to go out and sell, if you had the process, the back end dialed in, how much more work could you do? And it's not unusual for people to tell me, we could double like next year if I had the confidence to go out and sell things. So that opportunity cost can get pretty large. And it's what that means is take how much more revenue you could do times your net profit percentage, 10, 15, 20%. And that's how much the opportunity cost is. That's how much money is being left on the table. It's an uncomfortable process to go through, but it's a reality. A lot of people would say, yeah, I feel like I'm not making the money I should, but I don't know where it is. And they realize, oh, it's through these profit bleeds that can be traced back to the inefficiencies. Yeah.
I think it can be even hard to imagine at that stage, like what the growth potential is. Like doubling revenue sounds like it would be really, really challenging, but we've been able to do that plus a little bit more for this year. And because we have these systems in place, it doesn't feel like it's been that hard.
Let's talk about those results. Tell me about what's different now with your business from a revenue standpoint, from whatever standpoints are important to you. What are some of the biggest differences between now and before you went through this program?
Yeah, so I mean, we're still a relatively small growing business, but we're doing probably about 3.5 million in revenue this year, whereas it was about 1.5 million last year. And that 1.5 was a real struggle because of this chaos that was created. Included in that 3.5 million is a lot of pre-construction agreements where we're getting paid for that work up front, which is really nice to have that beneficial revenue. We have some big goals for next year as well, and our profit margin has actually gotten better for this year versus last year. And obviously, that helps when you're growing revenue.
What changes have you seen with your team, either in headcount, stress level? What's different with your team now?
So the group that we have now is a mix of a field crew and office staff. And then we have one person who is partially in the field and in the office. And what's interesting is, I think before SYCB, all the emphasis was on the field. All the construction happened in the field. That was what was most important. And really, the guys in the field are very talented. They just need to know what to do. And so now we've moved all the emphasis into the office, and it's completely changed everything. It's almost like we went from a construction company to a pre-construction company. And sure, we have a crew of guys in the field, but that could just be one more subcontractor if we really wanted to. And really, the reason why people come to us now is to plan out their projects. And it's just a complete 180 from where we were a year ago.
If you think about a really good construction company doing great projects, attracting the right clients, attracting the right people, profitable, growing, in my experience, there's a pretty good chance they're actually a great pre-construction company. Like you said, you can't see the pre-construction stuff because it's all happening behind the scenes. So that's definitely a mind shift for a lot of people. What about for you guys? What's different for you guys? Life outside of work, stress level, the desire to throw the phone in the garbage can and drive to Mexico. Like, what's different for you guys now after putting these doing the work to put these systems and processes in place?
Just before the SYCB, when I was probably working the most that I had been over the past few years, I was pretty much waking up at 5 a.m. most days, if not every day, to do office work, not going into the field. Just kept catching up on, I was doing all the admin stuff, dealing with some selections, even though a lot of it was going to Tom in the field, and then doing estimates and doing sales and dealing with marketing. And then a lot of, stress, trouble sleeping at night, just like thinking about, a couple of things that you need to do the next day. And then as going through SYCB was probably the worst, to be honest. Like, that was a ton of work. You're doing the same thing as you were already doing, and then you're also putting these things in place. But that short-term work is well worth it for the long-term gains. And now that we've got our accountability in place, and I'm mostly focusing on sales and marketing and managing the whole process, it's basically 40-hour work weeks, and I don't deal much with the actual construction of the projects at all.
And for me, every hour was just a different fire that I had to put out before. So I couldn't sit down and eat my lunch because there'd be a phone call that came in and I'd have to deal with something. And now I really get to live more week to week. And I know what I have to get done for next week, not what I have to get done for 2 o'clock today, and then for 3 o'clock today, and then for 4 o'clock. My life is schedulable, and I can plan to the future, and I know what I have to get done. The deadlines for pre-construction are a lot different than if you're working on a job that's not properly planned out, because your deadlines for those things are immediate, and there's no telling what the next thing is that you have to do. Versus if you plan everything out, life just becomes a lot calmer.
You guys were both in hospitality, finance and hospitality. Not sure why a couple of nice guys like you would ever end up in construction, but here you are. What are some things that are just the norm in the hospitality industry that you feel like are completely missing in construction? Like, everybody in the hospitality industry just does this. They don't think about it. And everybody in the construction industry should be doing these things.
In a restaurant, everything is systematized. I worked in a couple of Michelin star restaurants in New York before I opened my own, and basically what I learned there was all the systems. And whether it's a high-end restaurant or a casual restaurant, it's all about systems, and all the employees just follow the systems. They do their side work, and they whether it's kitchen staff or front of house, that's just expected, and that's how it works. And in construction, it's like everyone just expects that it's going to be chaos, from the homeowners to the business owners. It doesn't have to be that bad.
Yeah. And I just agree 100%. It's all systems. In restaurants and in hotels, there's a procedure for everything. And in construction, I think people sometimes think it's too complicated to come up with those systems because every project is supposedly different. But really, they're not that different from one to the next. And you can put a system in place to make them all relatively the same.
I think it's a myth that a lot of people believe that keeps them from ever attempting to systematize their business, which is these people are paying us a lot of money. They expect a custom experience and a custom process. If you believe that, then why bother creating systems? And then second, if you believe construction is chaos, then you won't even try. And I think that's a pretty pervasive belief. I hear it a lot. Construction's just chaos. I heard somebody say this, like, that they were talking to a big popular Instagram influencer who's doing $40 million of custom homes. And the guy said, look, it's just a shit show behind the scenes. It's all pretty on the front, pretty for the cameras, but it's a shit show behind the scenes because construction's chaos. And what I'm hearing you guys say is you took your revenue from $1.5 million to $3.5 million. You're working fewer hours, so you're doing more work, more projects, more customers, maybe more subcontractors, but you're working less and there's less chaos. So apparently there's not a one-to-one relationship with revenue and chaos. What would you say to those people who they just believe that construction is chaos and it's just the nature of the beast?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. Obviously, all the things we've talked about kind of contribute to that. And another thing is that just getting your average project size to be larger is a really, really big step as well. Because, whether you're doing a $150,000 project or a $50,000 project, you might have close to the same amount of headaches to deal with. And so that's been a really, really big change for us as well. Easier said than done, but that kind of goes back to the sales and marketing a little bit. And I kind of use, what we've learned in SYCB to do that marketing and sales too. So
That's a good realization that a lot of people make is if once they design their business, they realize, I don't want to do $50,000 projects. I don't want to do these little bathrooms. Our business is designed to do a certain type of project. Maybe it's not designed to do projects larger or smaller, but there's like a sweet spot that you design your project for and have a blueprint for. Yeah. Partnerships can be tricky, and family partnerships, since you guys are brothers-in-law, adds potentially, in many cases, another level of trickiness. I'm curious, how has going through this process with your accountability chart and establishing roles and responsibilities, and I guess in general terms, all of the work you've done, how has that helped you guys work together as business partners, if at all? Maybe it's made it worse. I hope it's made it better somehow. If so, how?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because when Ryan and I first started, I always said, I can't sit at a desk all day. So I wanted to be in the field. It's a little bit of getting older, but I've been able to come around to sitting at a desk more. And I think the timing worked out. But in the beginning, it was a really perfect partnership because Ryan had the patience to sit at a desk and I did not. So you had one guy who was in the office, one guy in the field. Now, as we've grown, I've just found it more rewarding to do the pre-construction work and be in the office because I'm actually enjoying it now. And we still have very different responsibilities. But what we've actually been discussing lately is potentially actually sharing in what we feel is the most important responsibility, right? Which is growth of the company. And really making sure that we've delegated out all the other responsibilities. Because one thing that we really like to do, I think, is brainstorm about the company and how we're going to grow and what we can do. And we like to collaborate on that together. And so I think it's interesting that we started the business so split apart. And now 5 years later, here we are. And I think we're about to finally merge together and kind of do the same job for the first time.
Yeah, and we've always had a really good partnership as we've, there's been a lot of different phases of this business already, but it's definitely the most strange, just before we kind of started SYCB, where we're just we just don't know what the answer is or where we should go from here. And it's trying to figure out, okay, is it improving the field or, is it something in the office or is it just the clients we need to improve? So, now it's just SYCB was a huge help for getting to the other side. And it took time and a lot of work, but yeah, everything's very smooth now.
I'm curious, what advice would you give to someone who's been listening to this podcast? Maybe they've heard other folks talk about their experiencing and they're considering joining our program, but they're hesitant. What would you tell them?
Well, I guess I would tell them to do it. I would tell them to sign up. I mean, if you're in a lull period and you think you don't have the finances to do it, that's actually the perfect time while you're in a lull because it might be a little bit quieter and you can dedicate a little more time. And if you're small, I noticed most of the people that were in SYCB were actually larger companies than ours. And I actually wish I had started it when I was a really, really small company because it's just easier to implement everything when you're smaller. The longer you wait, the harder it's going to be.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to assess the value beforehand and to make the leap. But, of all those things I talked about that were really big in our business for the last year that we've put in place, I feel like SYCB is the single thing that we can point to, in turning around our business processes and our profitability. We also just recently joined the CEO Alliance very recently. And I feel like that built-in accountability is going to be huge for us as well.
Now that you have these systems and processes in place and you have your business maybe more resilient and poised for growth, what do you feel like that makes possible for you? What are some things you guys are focused on as it relates to growth that you feel like are possible now?
Yeah, so I think, personally for ourselves, I think it just sets us up with making more money and being able to provide better for our families. But then I think it also puts our company in a better position to provide for the employees. I think a lot of construction companies are not necessarily the most enjoyable working environment. And why that is, I don't know, but I think going through this, it makes it easier for us to create an environment that is good to work in, which I think is kind of a rare thing in construction.
Yeah. Now, what do you think, Ryan? What do you feel like is possible now that you have these foundations in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think it should really have an impact on everyone that we are involved with, employees, trade partners, homeowners. I think is going to be fantastic. But yeah, personally, the most exciting thing is what our 2-year and 5-year goals are now, and what we think is realistic is a lot different than what we would have thought, a little over a year ago when we were just kind of scrambling to survive.
The reason you guys have seen results is you put the work in, you implemented. Frankly, information is useless without implementation. So implementation is really difficult. So what would you say are a couple of keys to implementing systems and changing things in a business that worked well for you? Like, what are some things that you found to be helpful when it came to implementing systems and getting people to change?
Yeah, I think personally, going into SYCB, it's an 8-week program. You have to go in knowing that it's going to be that you want to do everything in that 8 weeks in terms of at least getting started and going through the exercises, and knowing that it's going to be a ton of work. And like I said before, it's just, really worth the long-term gains. But I think just, getting the work done up front and not just saying, okay, well, we'll put these things in place down the road is huge. For us, having a partnership where there's that built-in accountability was great for us to be able to, make things stick. But I still think some things fell through the cracks a little bit. And that's where I think the CEO Alliance is actually going to be really helpful for us, just to get, Manish to tell us what we're doing wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. He will do that in the best way possible. He's great at that. Tom, what do you think? What were some of the keys to implementing systems and making changes?
One of the keys has been that we just constantly keep doing small adjustments. We've even talked about opening up our SYCB portal again and going through the whole process one more time. It's just a constant work in progress, and you always have to pick that job in the future where you're going to start to implement those changes. And you see if it goes better, if the crews are happier with what you've done, but just constantly working on every little detail of the business and every procedure that you do.
Yeah. I really like that idea of let's pick a project in the future and decide what we want to do differently on this one, update our processes, and use real projects to drive change through your process. It's more bite-sized, more real-time, seems like it's more useful rather than doing something that you may not see the benefit of for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. It's helpful. I like that strategy. Obviously, you guys have done a great job. You went through the program, you showed up, you did the work, you implemented, you've changed the way you think about things, which that's really the key. It's really about implementation. So not everybody does that. So hats off to you guys for sticking to it and implementing it. I'm sure at some point, like you mentioned, things fell through the cracks. Maybe you felt like you weren't doing a good job. Maybe you got overwhelmed, perfectionism, whatever, but you guys fought through all that. So hats off to you. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, usually I ask like 20 years ago, but let's say if you go back to Tom and Ryan in 2019, before you started this construction business, what's one piece of advice you wish somebody would have given you before you started your construction business?
When your business is pretty new and relatively small, focus less on the short-term financials of the business and more on the long-term growth plan and potential, including getting systems and marketing in place as early as possible. And then, working with a business coach or a program like SYCB as soon as practical, because it's such a catalyst and prerequisite for future growth to go as you'd like it to.
Yeah. Yeah. Tom, what do you think? What's one piece of advice you would go back and give 2019, Tom?
I think my advice would be to slow down a little bit, take on less work, take on less jobs. I think we always had a lot of attention to detail on jobs, and we always wanted them to come out perfect. But I think we sacrificed our business in an effort to make as many jobs as possible, as perfect as possible. And we should have just done less jobs and focused on our business, and on the quality of the work. That third element of ramping up revenue, it set us back. I don't think it actually pushed us forward. I think if we had spent more time focusing on our systems, we would have actually been further along than we are right now.
Yeah. Hey guys, Todd here. If you own a custom home building or remodeling business, let me ask you a few questions. First, how often do you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about project details, financial issues, or something else about your business, and you can't go back to sleep? Are you spending more than 10 hours a week working in the business, wearing multiple hats, putting out fires, and you feel like you can't work on your business as much as you want? Number 3, do you have enough documented systems and processes, or is it all in your head? Number 4, how good is your handoff of projects from the office to the field? Are you getting hammered by the just enough to start trap, doing just enough to start? And then lastly, do you feel stuck? Do you feel like you need to grow, but you're scared to, and you don't know how to do it? Maybe it feels like you need to hire, but you're afraid to make a mistake, and you're worried you can't afford to hire somebody. Well, if any of that resonates with you, you're not alone. And if you want to make your business a source of more freedom and a source of less stress, to systematize your construction business, and our team here at Construction Leading Edge has helped over 300 builders and remodelers systematize their business, and we can help you too. The first step is to schedule a call with my team by going to constructionleadingedge.com/apply. That's constructionleadingedge.com/APPLY, or you can send a text to this number, 877-755-2410, with the word apply. That's 877-755-2410. Just text the word apply and we'll get back to you. Now, let's get back to our episode. When we do stuff like that out of sequence, it's because we believe something to be true. Like, I've been guilty of thinking, all right, well, what I believe is most important is to generate leads and make sales. What I found is it's better, to focus on somewhere else. What do you think, what did you guys believe to be true back then that you realize was not accurate, that led you to focus on driving revenue and focusing on sales and focusing on things that weren't really the high priority? What would you say you believed back then that you now realize isn't that accurate?
One thing was I thought I had to be omnipresent. I thought I had to control everything. I had to always be on the job site. And now I realize there are much more talented people than myself out there, and managing them is actually a more important job than being that person on site. And right from the start, I just always thought I had to have that presence. And now I'm realizing that wasn't really what was important.
Yeah. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I think we just were doing what we thought we had to do. A lead would come in and we'd go and do an estimate, and we just, did a full estimate. That was what the client was expecting. So that's what we gave them. And we were competing and always trying to go to the lowest price and, get as many jobs as we could. And you don't even realize that there's another option. You're just doing whatever you can. And some of that is inevitable. You have to do that a little bit and learn the hard way at the start, but it would have been nicer to realize some things a little bit earlier too.
Yeah. I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about how you've practically moved up market. What are a couple of things you've done to attract larger projects that are a better fit for you? What are a couple of practical things you're doing to accomplish that?
Well, I think there's two main things. One is we've marketed our larger projects. So we like to market the projects that we've done that we'd like to get again, not market any project that we've gotten, right? So if we do a project and we feel that maybe it was a good project and a great customer, but it's not the direction that we want our business to continue to go in, we don't market that project. And then the other thing and this is more what Ryan does, is say no to the projects that we don't want. So try to identify early on that that's not a good way for us to spend our time, whether it be the office spending their time or the crew spending their time on site. It's not what we want to do. It's not what our business does. And so those two things, I think, have helped to drive the projects that we want and the size projects that we want and the clients that we want.
Yeah, a big part of it is what our marketing agency is helping us to do. But we have to do it at the right pace too. Like we got a couple of leads for, at a levels or something when we had only been in business for 6 months, and we just didn't have the contacts or the knowledge to take on a job like that. So we kind of had to be patient with everything and wait until we were ready. Yeah, it's a little bit of word of mouth and a lot of marketing.
Tom, you bring up a really good point. Saying no to the wrong projects as a marketing strategy seems a little counterintuitive, but when you think about saying no frees up your capacity. When you say yes to the wrong project, that means you need to say no to a lot of other things once you've committed to those things. So I completely agree, but that's a tough one for a lot of people to say no, because this little part of our brain says there's never going to be another project that comes along. This is the last one. And you dumbass, you just said no to the last project. You need to call them back and take their money. That just keeps you stuck. Whereas being clear on what type of project is best for your business, having the confidence to be able to say, yeah, we're not the best fit for that. So a quick no, and keeping your options and your capacity open for the right project. It's tough, but I completely agree. It's crucial if you want to grow. Completely counterintuitive to a lot of people. So important.
We've also found that sometimes when you tell someone no, maybe we get a phone call from someone and they want to do a kitchen refresh, and we'll say, well, that's not really what we do. Our job would be a full kitchen gut. And when we tell them that, they'll say, okay, we'll do a full kitchen gut then. So sometimes when you tell someone no, they will change their scope of work so that they can hear a yes. Right? We've had that a couple of times where people will adjust their scope of work so they can work with us.
There was a question that came up on one of the SYCB group calls recently, which was, how do you say no to somebody? If they're a referral, how do you say no? And this is a great way, which is to say, here's what we can do. Would you be interested in that scope of work? I never considered that option. Yeah, I like that. Well, good stuff, guys. Again, congratulations on the success. You guys have done a great job. Definitely looking forward to working with you guys in the CEO Alliance and seeing the results you get from there. We've seen tremendous results from guys and gals who've joined SYCB and then gone on into the CEO Alliance. It's super powerful. So I appreciate you guys coming on here, taking the time to share your experience and what you guys have learned. If people want to connect with you, follow you on social media, apply for a job, maybe get in touch with you about something, where's the best place or the places for them to connect with you?
We do use Instagram. Just look for White Maple Construction, and we keep our website pretty up to date, whitemapleconstruction.com. Our contact info is on there, or you could email either Ryan or I, Ryan at whitemapleconstruction.com and Tom at whitemapleconstruction.com.
Perfect. We'll include those links in the show notes. So thanks again, guys. I appreciate it. Look forward to watching you guys continue to grow and succeed in the coming years.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for everything, Todd. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Hey, before you go, if you're a custom builder, remodeler, or commercial GC doing over $1 million a year, what if you're missing one crucial step that could protect your margins before you even break ground? That's why I put together the free How to Buy Out a Construction Project Playbook. It's going to show you how to lock in costs, secure your subs, and protect your profit before jobs start. Would it be a bad idea to spend a few minutes to download a playbook that could add 3 to 7 points of net profit to your bottom line on every project? You can go get your copy of that playbook and that training for free at constructionleadingedge.com/buyout. There's no guarantees how long this will be free. It's available now for a limited time. That's constructionleadingedge.com/buyout. BUYOUT.